This is Beckett Price with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. Today is November 10th. It is currently 9:51 a.m. And we are here at the Pensacola Speckled Trout Club Civilian Conservation Corps building. I'm sorry, the Bream Fishermen Association.
Actually, we share the building.
You share the building,
We
okay.
share it with the Speckled Trout Club,
Okay.
the Northwest Florida Fly Fishermen, and then the Society for Creative Anachronism,
Okay.
which does period fighting and jousting in the yard.
Interesting. And we are here with Barbara Albrecht for the Pensacola Environmental Oral History Project. I'm joined by my colleague, Caitlin Remmert, who's my fellow interviewer, and all of our colleagues from the Oral History Program and the Gulf Scholars Program. So I'm going to get started. And I'm just going to ask you if you could please introduce yourself.
Sure.
Who are you? What do you do? That kind of thing.
So I am Barbara Albrecht. I moved to Pensacola in 1983 to go to the University of West Florida and study marine biology. I have a minor in geography, and I worked at the EPA as an intern. And so I was exposed to, I worked in the pathobiology department. So I would grow organisms that we would then expose to chemicals, and then we would do histology on them to see what was happening on a cellular level. And so I graduated in '87, decided I was going to do my master's on contaminated sediments with dieldrin and look at 3 generations of amphipods to see if they built up immunity. And dieldrin is a pesticide that is sort of a byproduct of DDT. Of course, you've heard of those chemicals. And so would have been interesting, except that at EPA, we had a fire in the wet lab. And that pretty much stopped me in my tracks, because in order to start my experiment, I needed 100,000 less than 24-hour-old amphipods. And to do that, I had been growing my cultures to the point where I was not going to do that again. And so it's like, all right, I don't need a master's. I've got a bachelor's, and I have a good basis. So from there, I started working with a couple of labs doing sediment work. So I worked on the EMAP program, Environmental Monitoring and Assessment Program, where we took sediment samples from all water bodies along the Gulf Coast, the bays, the estuaries, the bayous. And we ran the toxicity tests in the lab where I worked at EPA, and then a private lab, BSL, Biomonitoring Services Lab. Then there was a Valdez oil spill. Suddenly we switched gears to like, what kinds of products could we use with oil spills that would not kill all the organisms? So science definitely hooked me. My background is German, and Germans like to culture things, whether Europeans like to culture, whether it's tulips, whether it's birds, whether it's guinea pigs or fish. So I always enjoyed trying to cultivate invertebrates. So amphipods, shrimp, prawns. So kind of always had my hands in water. Water quality is sort of important in my world. So moved on from EPA in the lab and worked for a group called CTEC, Society of Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry, SETAC.org, where I learned some really valuable things about research, and that is to make an equal voice between academia, business, government, and non-governmental organizations, so NGOs. If you maintain a balance on all your panels of that, you will end up serving everybody in the community. Unfortunately, the pendulum seems to be swinging that unless you're like the Nature Conservancy with super deep pockets, little mom and pop things, and I consider BFA to be one, and we'll get into that, that it's really hard. So worked for CTEC for a number of years, was in charge of the whole effluent toxicity group. We traveled all over the country and taught different regional things about the Clean Water Act and how to identify chemicals from different industry and how to chase chemicals through groundwater. And eventually took a job with a consulting firm that we did a lot of work on military bases. And so we were doing a lot of natural attenuation work and looking at what happens when you have a chemical that was spilled here and 20 years later you're monitoring it in the groundwater and it's coming up in a marsh, which is what's happening with a lot of the Superfund sites that you guys are interested in. And so worked with them for a number of years. And then we had Hurricane Ivan, and we talked a little bit about how when a hurricane happens, like everything stops, and it takes a community 5 to 10 years to get back up on their feet. And we were hit hard by Ivan, and the company that I worked for, the engineering firm, they decided they were not going to rebuild in Pensacola. So I took a job with the Nature Conservancy and was proud. My gosh, I was proud to work for them because I was going to save the environment because that's what they do. Until I realized that the economic background of the Nature Conservancy is a dark and seedy place, and Florida is considered a philanthropy state. So deep pockets, so they're always asking for money, right? And the little low-hanging fruit that would be so easy to make the biggest difference. And if you knew something that they didn't know and they didn't want people to know, they buried it. And it's like, gosh. And I was so proud when I worked for them and so sad when I was asked, you have to give us a list of people that you know that have deep pockets so we can harass them into giving us money. I'm not going to do it. So that's a black eye on the Nature Conservancy. But the Nature Conservancy that I was familiar with was what Salt Marsh started, and then it morphed. And I think that's part of the problem is that the academic institutions, I mean, you guys are part of UF as a big player, you know, land grant college, football teams, Gatorade, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's fine. I'm not a marketing person. I'm not a branding person. But it's like, wait, shouldn't it be all academia? No, football brings in the money. So like UWF never had a football team. They were like one of the first universities near the water that could really do something for Northwest Florida. Oh no. So, you know, it's sad because you see opportunities, but here's the deal with that. Hindsight is always 2020. Coulda, woulda, and shoulda, you know, are just like three little triplets that you can always refer back to, but only you can make the difference, right? So, worked with Nature Conservancy for a number of years. And then my mother, who I only have one parent, I'm an only child, became very ill. And so I spent the last 2.5 years caring for her. And during that time, we had an oil spill that you guys might remember. And so I went to the university, again, to keep my toe in the water, if you will, and said, and I knew the folks that I worked with at the Center for Environmental Diagnostics and Bioremediation, and that's a mouthful, but I can show you their logo right there. I used to work with them at EPA in another life. So fast forward, they're at the university now. And I was like, hey, why don't we monitor the Gulf Coast and, you know, pick out set stations. So every week we went out twice a month and collected water quality and sand and offshore from the piers and whatnot samples, and then we brought them back to the university and analyzed them. So there's some interesting And I would take whoever was interested in going, students, whatever, but you pretty much had to be there at 7 a.m. and we had like a long route to go. But we were able at the university in CDB to see how the consortia of bacteria in the water column shifted from the regular population into oil eating, loving, dependent bacteria long before oil was seen or smelled or observed. And that was because they were dispersing the oil. Now, mind you, remember I told you I worked on Valdez oil spill stuff, right? Way back, right? But one of the things we learned is that all these dispersants, which is again very similar to your Dawn dishwashing in a bowl of greasy spaghetti sauce, the same amount of oil is there. It's just made much smaller. And the smaller you made it, the more accessible you made it to the food chain of different organisms, including bacteria, which have little teeny mouths, right? So we saw this complete shift. So we're volunteering, there's no money, we've had the economic downturn, everybody's bailing out everybody else, throwing money around like they had it, it grew on trees, which it did not. We have this oil spill. Let's go back to the reason we had an oil spill. We drill for oil offshore in a lot of countries. Scotland, Canada, the Pacific. Gulf of Mexico is like this little basin, right? It's nothing compared to these big areas. The oil industry in the US had 4 shutoff valves that were in line, 4 of them. Their lobbyists, people are paid big bucks to say what they want them to say, went in front of Congress and said, this is ridiculous. They cost $250,000 each. Oh my God, that's so expensive. We don't need 4, we just need 1. Well, you know what? Had there been 4, we wouldn't have had 87 days of pressurized oil from deep down coming up. Then what did they do? Okay, that was a mess. Nobody ever talked about that. But see, I'm like that person, like, what caused this? How come this doesn't happen in Scotland or Canada or other countries? Like, why are we the greatest country on earth, whatever that means, with all these laws that people don't want to deal with, but we can like pay somebody to look pretty and go stand in front of somebody and mouth off something that they don't even know and cause this? Nobody talked about that. Okay, so now it is what it is. Spewing oil, knee-jerk reaction. Nobody was prepared. We allow drilling for oil in the Gulf, drilling for oil everywhere else, but we don't have what happens when there's an emergency. What if you're a hospital and you run out of gauze pads? That's about the extent of it. You knew that there was going to be a problem down the road. You'd think that we would have staged something. Well, what did we do? We brought in something that we had never tried, core exit. We had different habitats. So in South Florida, we had corals, value the corals, big economic boom. Up here, we have marshes, mosquitoes, alligators. Who values that? Well, if you value the fishery, you should. What about oysters? What about all the... So we sprayed liberally poison on everything because we didn't want to see the oil. Oh my God, you can't let the tourists see this. We're going to clip. It's like, oh my God. People are putting booms in front of the pass on Pensacola Beach. I mean, like a boom in front of all of these Northwest Florida estuaries. It's like, oh, that's going to help. That's a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage. That's like nothing. And then they spray all this mess that gets into, Louisiana had it so bad. So did you ever wonder, and I bet you didn't, but I'm going to tell you, did you ever wonder why Florida, who doesn't allow drilling on Florida waters, it has to be federal waters, right? And we don't even allow that. Why they got so much money from the oil spill, even though we didn't allow? So interesting because, I mean, Texas, because of the Gulf Stream and the way it moves, they got a little bit. Louisiana got hammered, no doubt. Mississippi got hammered. Alabama, Alabama has 34 miles of coastline. Poor Alabama. We've got thousands of miles. We don't care. We don't care about our coast unless there's money connected. Well, if you had a beautiful coast, we'd give you more money. Well, then we're going to make a beautiful coast. It's like, let's make the water quality and the habitat healthy, and then we'd have really a beautiful coast, right? I mean, we're going about it all wrong. So everybody got tons of money. And then Florida was like, well, we should get a lot of money because we don't even allow it here. They don't allow it because of Bill Nelson, who got voted out. He was a champion for keeping oil drilling out of Florida. And then Rick Scott, that monster, yes, he is a monster, he basically took his position. And it's like, oh my God, now we're like in serious trouble because we don't have advocates for the environment. And this is all 50,000 foot level, right? This is not on the ground. It's hard to see the forest through the trees, but if you're up here and you can watch these things. So we have this oil spill. We've got Rick Scott, who's a monster. And, you know, what does he do? He gets rid of the Department of Community Affairs, and he brings on the Department of Economic Opportunities. He wants to like put, you know, much like DeSantis, hotels and whatever, and naming rights for, you know, the water fountain and the bathroom and whatever, idiot, whatever. Don't even get me started. Too late. I'm started. So, anyway, we get all these people who don't understand the checks and balances and what it took to maintain the communities and the culture, you know. So worked with the oil spill here, and then my mom died. And then I was really like without a compass heading, because for those of you that are lucky enough to have your parents give you a direction, and they plant all these great seeds in you as you're growing up, and you learn like integrity and humility and morals. But when you lose that, you kind of have to find your own way. Now, I had some really crazy health issues when I was growing up, and you might notice I wear a hat, and that's because I have no hair. And when I turned 40, I lost my hair really rapidly, and then I lost my voice for 2.5 years. So I learned a lot during that time, and I kind of made a deal with my maker, and I call her Mother Nature. Others have different names, but I told her, if you give me back my voice, I will speak for the creeks. And it's like, it's okay, I can be bald. I got to be blonde for 40 years, not a big deal. So fast forward, I decided I did not want to work for Nature Conservancy, even though I was so honored to work for them, until I saw their true colors. And even now, when I hear some of the good things that they're doing, there's this, which, you know, is so sad, but it is what it is. And the BFA, I became a member of them in 1989. So again, I moved here in 83, and these old guys, this was their clubhouse, right? They're a bunch of hunters, fishers, campers. This is what they lived for. And they grew up in this area in the 1920s, the 1930s, and they didn't even know what they had, but they loved the natural settings. They loved hunting and fishing. They were told as kids when there was no refrigeration, take this bucket and your sisters and brothers and go to the creek. And every waterway was accessible from upland and go get supper. And supper was whatever they caught, crab, shrimp, redfish, whatever. And that was, they lived off the land. So imagine when these guys got older and joined the military, which is what a lot of them did, and they went to places like Vietnam, or they fought in World War II, or they went to Papua New Guinea for the Korean War. I mean, these are like true blue heroes, right? And they come home to visit their families, and they notice that their beloved bays are dying. And they're pissed. And they get organized. And they get like, what can we do? And, you know, it wasn't just here. It was happening everywhere. I mean, Skyline Chili Girl, Cuyahoga River caught on fire. I'm sorry, not to be, but the Cuyahoga River catching on fire was the catalyst that pushed people over the edge. And, you know, why, you know, somebody needs to be run over and die before we get serious. I don't understand, especially we have the ability to have forethought and hindsight. And yet we just are spoon-fed things that we need to hear, whatever. Anyway, they got mad, they got organized, and they started going to Tallahassee, 200 miles away, once a month on Highway 90, because the interstate had not been built yet, to remind the governor and all the people that basically represent Northwest Florida that 200 miles to the west, the bays were dying. Jackie Lane was growing, her family was growing up, and they were living on, you know, Perdido Bay. And others, like all these people knew each other because, you know, the population wasn't near what it is now. But they were mad. And in 1970, the governor finally sent over some pollution biologists, and they started the Department of Pollution Prevention. And that has morphed into the Department of Environmental Regulation, which is now morphed into the Department of Environmental Protection. And I don't know if you saw or not, but Sean Hamilton just stepped down this week as the head of DEP. Sean Hamilton, super nice man, was the Northwest Florida director for a number of years until DeSantis came into office and then selected him. And you know what his background is with the environment? Zero. He was a yes man in the military. He was the IT dude that loaded new programs and made sure that cybersecurity at DEP worked. But he rose up through the ranks as a yes man. There's nothing wrong with a yes man unless you surround yourself with yes men and they don't know anything. And then it's a real problem. Sean's a nice man. I will give you that. He is a really nice man, but he's in way over his head. And that's what we call the Peter Principle, and you'll have to look that up because that's, but anyway, the governors who have not valued the environment have given away so much of your heritage. And there are just a handful of us that understand the big picture and are fighting for that. But getting back to the BFA, they sat down with the newly appointed biologists from the pollution prevention and with the newly formed University of West Florida, which kind of opened up first university in this neck of the woods. I mean, Gainesville UF, FSU, but we didn't have all these little college campuses. The EPA was formed in 1970, and so before that it was a fisheries station. So now they had a lot of fisheries biologists that were also noticing the trend of populations going down. So BFA sat down and they started this water quality monitoring station. And there are 48 stations that they would visit quarterly. So they were divided kind of like the Blackwater and Yellow, the upper Escambia Perdido, and then the lower Urban. And they collected water quality samples from each of those set stations since the late 1960s. And DEP now did the analysis. And guess what? That work has never made it into the public domain. It never got digitized. Oh no, say it ain't so. Yeah. Because you know what? It would show that not much has changed. So, what's really ironic about all this is that we sampled BFA quarterly monitoring every month, different station, so that we would have seasonal data. And this program started the Status and Trends program, which is a really big deal in bureaucratic information because you can see what land use changes are mirrored in our waters. So Matt Deitch, University of Florida, who's since left, great guy. He was at our satellite campus. He and Zheng, who I worked with at CEDB at UWF, wrote a grant to take all the data and digitize it. That was during COVID. Evidently, that should be coming out soon. I'll be holding people's feet to the fire. You can bet on it. Because the state of Florida basically said, oh no, we don't have any data. It's like, you're the one that has housed it. You're the one that has relaxed the rules to allow the degradation of many of the things. So it's interesting because you've heard about the estuary programs. And so this is a wonderful example of an opportunity. So when the BP oil spill occurred, my suggestion, Barbara Albrecht, no PhD here, was why not give $1 million to Jackie Lane for the Perdido? Why not give the Friends of Perdido Bay, right? Why not give the BFA $1 million for the areas that they've been monitoring? The Choctawhatchee Bay Alliance, $1 million, and St. Andrew Bay RMA Resource Management Area, $1 million. Would have been $4 million to 4 citizen volunteer groups, 2 of them connected to a university. So they're connected to state colleges. They used to be connected to junior colleges, but we keep morphing. So technology moves along, branding changes, missions change. BFA hasn't changed. We're kind of, but everybody else has changed and they control the money. So that makes it a little more difficult. No. We're going to have, people are like, oh, we can't give each of these groups $1 million. They won't know what to do. Each one of these watersheds has specific problems. And the only people that know those problems are the people that have been working there, right? How much money has been wasted? $10.2 million for Bruce Beach. 1 million, 1 million, 1 million. Just saying, right? Just saying. And, so they decide they're going to have a contest we need another estuary program. We've got one here with Mobile Bay. And by the way, Roberta Swan, who's in charge of that, she rocks. She kicks ass. She takes names. She is awesome. Over here, they've got an Apalachicola, a NERS, a National Estuarine Reserve. So these are federally funded situations that get dedicated money every year. And so right now there's this contest, because we're like absolutely cray-cray about contests, where which one of these estuary programs will get dedicated funding? Who will win $1 million every year so we don't have to go find money every year, because money drives everything? It's like, you know what? Why don't you just do your damn job? Oh no, it is a flippant contest. It is ridiculous. It's as bad as football games. It is just, and I'm not a sports fanatic, as you can tell. So they decided to combine the Perdido Bay and the Pensacola Bay estuaries. And they won a $2 million grant funded by EPA and NOAA and all of the trustees in the state of Florida to stand up an estuary program. Well, lo and behold, I've been a part of that group since 2002. Dum-de-dum-dum. I know where all the bodies are buried. Oh, they can't stand me. Okay, I'm not going to be ugly. I just know where the bodies are buried, and I'm going to redirect, right? That's what we have to do in life. We have to pivot, adjust, and redirect. So, Choctawhatchee Bay Alliance is getting funded to try to stand up their CCMP. We love acronyms. Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan by their county commissioners. St. Andrew has combined with St. Joe, and they are in the same situation. And I used to work with the individual groups when I was advocating that everybody should have $1 million each because they know where the problems are. Oh, and water management, there's some clowns. There are some amazing clowns in our governmental agencies. So this is a perfect time for me to explain what baklava is. Everybody know what baklava, the Greek dessert, is? Tons of little flaky layers of phyllo dough with a couple nuts thrown in, and then held together with this ooey gooey bureaucracy that we call politics. It is atrocious. I can go to a meeting tomorrow, city, county, region, and I can get up and say my name and then say baklava, and half the people in the room will fall out of their chairs laughing, because they know that that's how I feel about government, because nothing gets done. And it's horrendous how much money is wasted. But job security. So anyway, these groups are trying really hard to move things forward. We have an estuary program that now has a lobbyist. City pays them $30,000. The county pays them $30,000. So for $60,000, they fly to Washington, D.C. and tell everybody there how important they are in Pensacola, Florida, and need to have dedicated $1 million. Oh, okay. So are things improving since we got this estuary program? In fact, if anything, and I should have brought this map, water quality is getting worse. They had to close down a lot of the bays to fecal coliform. Oh no, how did that happen? Are we ignoring our aged infrastructure to make big, beautiful parks for people to go walk and dine and maybe take a photo op? Okay, so I started the Panhandle Watershed Alliance. We have a little website. It's nothing. It's a concept. in a perfect world, it would succeed, but I'm not a marketing person. But it just basically says, if you inform the public can make informed decisions. What a concept, right? So we're really good at spending money. Oh my God, we're great at that. We're not really good at following through, and we're absolutely crappy at maintenance. This building is a wonderful example. So much hoopla is going on into this park being a cemetery for what probably was an old Negro and Creole church that was owned by a man who was a freeman, who was a freed man, and had a church a few blocks up. But then a lot of the people who helped build downtown in the 18 and 1900s, because we have a natural deep water port, they came from Europe. They came from the West Indies. They came from other places. And, we were platting out this part of the city to make everything, much more hospitable for people. And so they're more interested in preserving, and I'm all about it, but do so for the building as well. But again, it's not sexy to be thinking about, old buildings, and it's much better to have photo ops. So BFA was contacted in March of 2020 and told we are non-essential and we don't need water quality data sampling anymore. What? Excuse me? So it's like, okay. And of course, COVID was scary. Hello, I'm sure somebody in this room lost somebody that they loved to COVID. And good Lord, it was frightening again, because we didn't really invest in some of the previous concerns that we had with, invasive species and so on. So one of the things that BFA has always done was to kind of engage the public. So in 2019, and all of this information is on our website, but anyway, the reports and all. So we invited the public to basically hang a cage off of their dock. And if they didn't live on the water and didn't have a dock, we would help them find a private dock that they would have access to. And we put in 75 baby oysters that are called spat. And they're triploid, which means that they're basically, they're not sexually active. They're hermaphrodites. And so they were not able to reproduce. So they would put all their energy into growth and none of the energy, so to speak, into gonadal development. And so we put them all over, and we took students out in the field about every 2 to 3 months, and we collected survival, growth, weight, and we also noted what the cages looked like, what other organisms. And so we wrote that up during our little lull with what we thought we would then be resuming with water quality. At the same time that we were writing up this project and looking at survival rates, we were also doing water quality monitoring at Bruce Beach all the way up into Bayou Tahar. In 2014, when the Restore funding became available through the Restore Act, I wrote the Carpenter Creek Bayou Tahar Restoration Plan, which, let's see, 2.2 million went to an engineering firm that wrote a master plan. They just put out a bid for another couple of million to tackle from what they're calling the headwaters. They've cut off the 3 main headwater creeks that feed into the system. But anyway, all that's moving along, but it's not the way I envisioned it. And by the way, BFA has never been invited to participate in that, which is disappointing, even though we have enough data on Bayou Tahar. We have 3 sites in the upper watershed and then upper and lower bayou. So I selected this particular project as a restore project to see if Escambia County and the city of Pensacola, 2 entities that share one small watershed, could get on the same page for the greater good. Lots of fighting, lots of FOIA. We have information, we don't want to share it with the county. We have information, we don't want to share it with the city. How is that even possible? So that's kind of what I've been involved with.
Wow, thank you so much for walking us through all of that. You have your hands in so many projects, and I'm curious about how you organize and you manage your time, how you deal with the scope of that work.
So I'm probably not really good at managing my time. So I'll just show you my pink belly right off the bat. Like right here, I have the BFA newsletter, which should have gone out in August, September. But I have to say, it'll be a much better newsletter now that I've got a new perspective. As I've mentioned, I have a new position, so I've been gone for 3 months. And it's interesting what I can focus in on now. So the mission, and I shared with you that I speak for the creeks. If it weren't for our small creeks, our main rivers and the estuaries and the bayous that we love, and we actually need them more than they need us, would not have a voice. And so, for instance, like in Milton, there is a need, and it's been ongoing since 2003, 4, 5, where the Department of Community Affairs, that was dismantled by Rick Scott, recognized that the community was growing and they would need a new wastewater treatment plant. Okay. And they identified an area in a commerce park, and that area was away from the river and had a pretty good buffer. But it turns out they had a crooked mayor, and he embezzled money. They could only prove 650,000, but it's like more like 875,000. And he ended up going on to work with the United Way and embezzled a bunch of money from them, and he's now sitting in jail. But see, one bad apple can really mess up the whole bunch. In that case, Florida Power and Light came along, took the property that had been identified for the wastewater treatment plant, and put up a substation. Zip zap. Great. So then they said, well, nobody really wants a wastewater treatment plant in their backyard, so we'll just move it over here, next to a bayou, next to a basin. Well, here's the thing about us. You guys in Gainesville, you have karst formation, you have springs, you have limestone outcroppings. We're a different animal here on the Gulf Coast. We have highly erodible sandy soils. We don't have rocks. All the rocks you see around here, not native rocks. We shouldn't be using them. Bah! They love rocks. They're cheap. You can throw them down, not a problem. God forbid you should have to scurry over them to get to the water's edge, because you could break your leg. And by the way, when it gets hot here in the summer and it becomes Africa hot, and I know you guys know that because Gainesville gets Africa hot too, those hot rocks radiate heat to the water, Water doesn't hold as much oxygen when it's warm, so you lose all your sensitive species. And we don't even think like that. We're like so disconnected. Oh, Barbara, nobody wants to hear about rocks. Okay. So by putting a wastewater treatment plant on a bluff that's made of highly erodible sandy soils and increasing its size to handle the population, and they're under a consent order by DEP. Remember, I just told you that the head of DEP just stepped down? Nice guy. It's a shit show. It is a shit show what is going on. The DEP locally has permitted it. There's an engineering firm that can't wait to start building it. And it's in a highly vulnerable place. And what do we know about climate change? I mean, some people don't believe in it. Okay. You know, some people still think the world is flat. Okay. So I'm involved with that. I'm involved with the fact that they want to take part of the spray fields from the new wastewater treatment plant, which, by the way, will only handle nutrients and bacteria. Okay, but guess what? We have forever chemicals. We have herbicide, pesticides, pharmaceuticals. None of our wastewater treatment plants treat for that. But I tell you what happens. You can follow the effluent and pharmaceuticals into the plant. They come out of the plant, they're still intact. And then we discharge them into a river, and invertebrates, like those little amphipods that hung on sediments that I used to like be partial to, are going to be affected. 1 part per million. That would be 1 million white ping pong balls and 1 red one and 1 white one out. That's 1 part per million of a chemical that can go through a wastewater treatment plant that could impact them. But we're not looking at that picture. You know, there's a saying that the meek shall inherit the earth. The meek are going to be the microbes, the viruses, the itty bitties that we don't see coming. Because we're just waiting for big things. It's going to be the little things. Look at what COVID did. Look at how fast it flew through populations. And look how fast Mother Nature recovered. Look at Europe. You know, no tourism. The waters in Venice cleared. Holy cow. I mean, air pollution went away. I mean, Mother Nature is resilient. We just need to get out of her way. Okay. Next question.
I think I want to go back. You told us earlier that you grew up in Miami, right? Okay, so what could you sort of reflect on that experience and on any memories that you recall that really inspired you to be a lover of the environment, an advocate for the environment?
Sure. So I shared with you that I'm an only child. So my mother was a lot older, and my mother immigrated from Germany to the US in 1955. And she had grown up during World War II, and she saw many hard things. And she became a medical doctor in Germany in 1953. And she came to the US on a ship through Ellis Island, Statue of Liberty, and ended up having a position in Chicago, Illinois, where she was starting as a bronchoscopist, which is basically looking at your lungs. Her specialty in medicine was tuberculosis, which was a big issue in World War II. And when she came to the US, they said, women are not doctors. Women are nurses. Men are doctors. And she said, no, hell no, and went back to school. I came along a few years later, I'm an illegitimate child. My father was very married. He had a family of his own. He had two adopted children, and I was a big secret. So my mother flew to Germany when I was very little, and my grandparents raised me till I was 5. Then we moved back to Chicago, and when I turned 9, we moved from Chicago in 1970 to Miami. And my first impression was so exciting because it was warm. They had had a pop-up shower and the sun was already coming out, and kids were walking home from school barefoot. And it was like, I want to live here. So I have always been a water baby. I get my biggest happy place when I swim through grass beds. I have always enjoyed looking under the rock and near the log as opposed to like, I want to see big sharks with big teeth. Okay. So I want to understand how the little parts work because they're the foundation that the big parts depend on. So I think, growing up near the coast, spending lots of time near the water. So my Sundays were typically, my mother would take a whole stack of journals, a chair, we would bring lunch, and we would go somewhere and I would either fish or snorkel or play in the water. And I was sort of left to my own devices. That's how I grew up.
It's beautiful. I love the image of you just floating through the seagrass. That's very beautiful.
I have so many seagrass pictures if you ever want to see them because I have been doing work with Jane Caffrey, who is a seagrass researcher. So basically some really beautiful work coming out of University of West Florida.
I think I want to switch gears because we've been talking for about 50 minutes or so. And well, I guess before that, I wanted to ask a little more specifically. Before we started the interview, we were talking about how we had just gone to the second opening of Bruce Beach, and you were talking about your water quality monitoring there. And I was curious about how has the interaction been with the CRA in the city while you've been doing that monitoring?
Not good. I don't know why either. I mean, I do know that I have a little prickly personality, but again, it didn't start out that way. It started out very giving and involved volunteer, but then over time, I think everybody wants to kind of control the messaging, and the delivery, and it's kind of like just say what it is, Let the So, for instance, with Bruce Beach, and I would encourage you to go to the website and look at the documents that we've done. So it's BREAM, BREAM, fishermen, MEN.org. And we've got a bunch of projects, and Bruce Beach has its own tab. So what happened was the Trillium property, which is now the Maritime Park, Ball Stadium, blah, blah, blah. That area used to be a contaminated site. It's probably a Superfund site that somebody ran out of money and couldn't bless as a Superfund site. And so forever and a day, we had trains and whatnot that would offload and onload cargo. And then it became sort of a site that nobody took care of. And then you had a lot of people that were homeless that were sleeping out there. And if you go on Google Earth and you go in the Wayback Machine and look at what it looked like, even 80s, 90s, you'll see it was vacant land. When they came along to after Hurricane Ivan, which is when the city kind of got a renovation, if you will, they were like, oh, we can develop this and we need a ballpark. Well, if you look at the studies, ballparks are subsidized heavily by the city, as is this one. But when they were kind of dismantling everything, they were also kind of dumping things at Bruce Beach. Now, Bruce Beach has a beautiful long history. I'm sure you've done your homework on that. So they they took a lot of the Trillium stuff and dumped it over there because it's cheaper than going all the way to the landfill. And when you don't have people that are checking up on your people, well, then people cut corners. That just seems to be the nature of the game. So all the while, Bruce Beach, Audubon was going there doing their bird counts. Different hurricanes would come in, flamingos got washed in, whatever. So anyway, then the emphasis after the wastewater treatment plant went away in the ballpark, and we're going to offer more development, blah, blah, blah. There's what, 1,200 homes, I think, slated for the 19 acres. Well, the gentleman who probably has the biggest investment to lose wanted to make sure that became a park. But there is a city councilwoman named Ann Hill who said, well, shouldn't we look at the water quality? Beautiful. Thank you, Ann. And the reality is, Pensacola is an old city. So just like St. Augustine, just like Savannah, Georgia, just like Mobile, there's 1,000 old cities that have old infrastructure. It's nothing surprising. What's surprising is what lengths we go through to bury doing the right thing instead of addressing it. I mean, it's like letting your 16-year-old kid drive around on cars that have ball tires. You just don't do that. And yet, that seems to be the MO around here. And it's like, my goodness. So, BFA used to have stations in downtown Pensacola, and they were ignored until over time they just quit sampling. But the history is there because we're getting it all digitized. I'm patting myself on the back for that. Everything is so much harder. This building, protecting it, so hard. Why? I don't understand. I mean, I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and get to work, but it's like there are just some things that are a no-brainer. And downtown Pensacola is one. So we started sampling. Ann Hill gave BFA, nonprofit, like, I don't know, $890, Mickey Mouse. And I took that money, turned right around, went to UWF, which has a NELAC certified, top of the line certified bacteria lab. And I said, can we sample once a week at 3 stations? I'll find more money. So like I'll host a bake sale to get money to pay for bacteria testing. That's what it feels like. And what we'll end up doing is let's just monitor it for a year. Well, we got 6 months into it. By the way, a whole bunch of students got experience in the field after a rain event, after all these different conditions, and then started seeing the data. And that's the kind of work that I've always enjoyed. Collecting the data, analyzing it when you have enough of a data set to understand. So that's what gave us the impetus to report back to the city, because it was a city councilwoman, that we had a problem after each rain event. So then we got a little more money to do source tracking in stormwater outlets. Now, I know sewage is going to be in the sewage infrastructure, and stormwater shouldn't have sewage in it. But if it did, would it be canine, feline, bovine, ovine, swine, bird, avian, or human? So we sampled, and we did this feedback loop where we sampled stormwater outfalls, we popped lids, and we were able to say, oh, this is a hot spot, but the piping underground. And see, there's been such a turnover at the city. Nobody knows who did what when. It's all like, don't know. Where's Waldo? Don't know. So what ended up happening is we found some hot spots, but the city didn't want to hear it. So they buried it. Nice. But all the while, like secretly, I'm happy because I've always advocated that students that are interested in monitoring should monitor and maybe get paid a little bit because the world's gotten expensive. But then that monitoring has to be done right. And DEP clearly doesn't want to know that there's a problem because then they'd have to deal with it. And by the way, water quality is getting worse, not better, and everything's growing. Could there be a problem? Maybe. So Bruce Beach, for me, was a situation where it's like, look, we know we have a problem. We want to be a part of the solution. Oh, no, we've got contractors that'll handle that. All the while, ECUA, our municipality, they're like, Barbara, will you write us a letter of support so that we can get a grant for bacterial monitoring? It's like, boy, is that a slap in the face? You won't give us a dime, but you want a letter of support? The new estuary program, oh my goodness, our logo's all over their page. They've never done a thing for us. And I have given them, there's a library in there. I've given them access to everything. And they're like, oh, we think we're doing good things for you. How's that? I'm not feeling the love. So Bruce Beach, the estuary program has its roots with Escambia County. Escambia County, now, Keith Wilkins worked for them and he was top notch. But there's a few people that work at Escambia County that are not top notch. And yeah, they've built up a nice program, but guess what? The money seems to funnel that way. It doesn't funnel to little nonprofits, but we've done some good work. And boy, that just pisses them off. Yeah, it's like Jackie Lane. She's done some good work, and that just pisses them off. And it's like, wait, you're telling people you want to collaborate, cooperate, support, compliment? Those are all words. They don't have any meaning behind them. So Bruce Beach was, Bruce Beach was intended to take the wetland area and to, before it was cleared, as it is today, there were some live oaks that were as big as the ones that are outside this building. Tremendous. And actually, during Hurricane Sally, which happened in September of 20, one of those giant live oaks fell over, but was still alive. And some people built a tree fort with guardrails and swing bridges, beautifully done. I mean, they were totally engineers and sailors because lots of sailor knots were going on there. And the city freaked out. Freaked out. No, you can't have that. Started cutting down the trees. I was like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Some people see a park like this and see it envisioned with wall-to-wall condos, and that to them is beautiful. Pensacola Beach, surely you've had a chance to go out there. If it weren't for Earl Bowden, who basically got the Gulf Islands National Seashore to protect our island, they would be wall-to-wall condos. Miami Beach, where I grew up. Disgusting. So beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And Bruce Beach was a beautiful natural area, which could have had wonderful little paths through it. But nope, they put a lot of money into hardening it. And, it's going to help them sell condos downtown. And that'll increase the tax the tax fund that they're going to get, their property taxes? And then do you think that they'll put any effort or money into fixing the aged infrastructure? So I reminded them that this building was in the city. So I was shocked when I found out that 17th Avenue is part of the eastern core of the community redevelopment area. And so, I'm just going to be that annoying little mosquito that every time they bring up, what can we do? I'll point out this building is being neglected.
Hi, you talked a little bit about the Panhandle Watershed Alliance. I was wondering like what your main motivations were behind that and what are your hopes for the future with that?
So the Panhandle Watershed Alliance was this vision where all of the groups that were already working in their watersheds, that we had an umbrella organization that would give us stronger teeth, if you will. So interestingly enough, and I've got this map here, this identifies the entire watersheds. And so these are the 4 large estuaries and then the watersheds that feed them. And so it's actually like 13,000 and 1,100 square miles, and it encompasses 23 counties. And so I had some pretty lofty ideas, which, you know what, take them and run with them, make them happen, because ideas are kind of like one of those things where they come to you, and if you don't act on them, they go to someone else. So, and I don't have the energy anymore. I'm tired. So imagine this. Recycling, right? Gosh, there is a hot potato. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's just as bad as wastewater treatment plants, right? Nobody wants to talk about poop. And yet, if we don't do it every day, we're in trouble, right? So, what if you took all the little communities that lived in this area and are connected by rail and had 2 or 3 jobs in each of the 23 counties that were dedicated to recycling? And you actually turned it into a program where you took it by rail and you made trek boards that recycled plastic. Now, all of you are too young to remember S&H green stamps, but I'm going to give you a really quick background. S&H green stamps were a promotion, a marketing effort back in the Mad Men days. Have you guys watched Mad Men? No? Okay, it's from the 60s and 70s. It's marketing. And every time you went to the grocery store and your bill was, $79.85 or $112, which it probably never was then, you got the same amount in S&H green stamps. And then every kitchen, and if you have grandparents that are still alive, ask them because they'll remember this. Every kitchen in the world, in the U.S., had a dedicated drawer that had S&H green stamps books and stamps in it. And if you wanted a new toaster or an iron or whatever, a garden chair, you could go to your S&H green stamps books, paste in so that each page hit whatever the quota was, and have these books, and then you could redeem them for valuable prizes. Great. So what if we had something where we had plastics recycling, and you have what, 1 through 7, 1 through 8? And what if you got points for the different quantities that you, by the way, cleaned, that you organized, and you brought to a station? And then you could redeem that for valuable prizes, And what if you did it on a large area that's interstate? So it's Florida and Alabama. And guess what it would do? It would get all that plastic crap out of our watersheds. Because frankly, the plastics are also the vector for a lot of bacteria. And it's getting into our food source, which is getting into us, which is becoming a problem. So we have, that was one of the Panhandle watershed ideas. Now, since we started this, I've been able to talk to the university, and this paper is also on our Brim Fisherman website, into doing the upper watersheds. Because the BFA has always had this ability to go into Alabama and to go wherever. Now, Escambia County wants to take over BFA sampling in Escambia County, but they're hemmed in by Escambia County. And Santa Rosa County wants to sample, but they're hemmed in by that. And it's like, well, that's not really the purpose of the BFA. They were able to go wherever they wanted. And if they saw a problem, they would grab an extra sample. So Bruce Beach is, again, an example of how we spend a lot of money. So Audubon, Native Plant Society, Brim Fishermen, Panhandle Watershed, which is just a concept, and about a dozen other groups advocated to leave Bruce Beach natural, make some paths, and address water quality. And we know exactly what happened. None of the above. Frustrating? Muy poquito. Yeah.
All right. I want to open it up to my colleagues
Sure.
who undoubtedly have questions for you. So
Hi, this is, excuse me, this is Amelia Sewell, and I want to say I know you've done so much beautiful work advocating for the environment, and you've expressed frustration that environmental remediation is being neglected in this area. I want to know what you think is it's really going to take for those in power to address some of the important issues that you're concerned about, especially water quality in this area. What's really going to push them to, make some serious changes?
So I hope this doesn't happen. I hope that nobody loses a loved one because of a bacterial infection that they picked up in the water and got Vibrio and ignored and died. I hope it doesn't happen. But much like when the oil spill happened, much like when hurricanes hit, it's not if, it's when. And we have a lot of cases of Vibrio in Northwest Florida that we never tell the public about. And I have an autoimmune problem. I accumulate heavy metals. I, you know, I don't blame anyone for that. But I'm sure my first dose was from my mother's breast milk. She worked in a bronchoscopy lab. She worked with mercury. We didn't know then that it bioaccumulates. I've grown up near the water eating seafood. We have a lot of wetlands. Methyl mercury gets into the food chain in wetlands. They are the nursery grounds. It is what it is. You know what? In life, when life hands you lemons, you learn how to make lemonade. I feel like I've made some damn good lemonade. But I hope it doesn't come to something like that. But even Senator Broxson, Northwest District Senator Broxson, got Vibrio, had to have some of his fingers amputated, had the opportunity to inform the public, to stand up and be a leader, to say this is serious, and chose not to. What a coward. What a coward. And yet, biggest advocate for the estuary program, this, that, and the other, I want to leave a legacy. I want to leave water quality better. Bob Cole, Santa Rosa County Commissioner. Bob Cole must go. He had an opportunity for like 20 years to do the right thing with Blackwater. Oh no, only when it benefited him, when it gave him little brownie points. I have absolutely no respect for people that go into politics. I mean, they start off great, ambitious, recycling in a whole area, and then they get waylaid. It's unfortunate. You know, City of Milton, 4th of July, a year and a half ago, had like a 20,000 gallon sewage spill. Hello. But it was 4th of July weekend and they could make so much money. And you know, why should we tell the public? I mean, just because it's Africa hot and people want to go water skiing and kayaking, should we tell them? Let's not. Who does stuff like that? Elected officials. That's who does stuff like that. So, yeah, you know what? Actions speak louder than words.
Thank you.
Yeah. I apologize if this was a question you were going to ask, Beckett. So we've been kind of asking all of our interviewees this trip, what would justice look like for you?
Oh, my goodness. Right off the bat, it would be to have the organization and funding that would allow Brim Fisherman's water quality monitoring program to continue and expand and actually blend that retiree, the student, the person that doesn't have any background but would appreciate a day out in the field, to go sample and see what it's all about and see some of the beauty, to have it be housed in an organization that really cares about making things better. I'll tell you a good Bob Cole story, and I'm sorry I didn't bring this map in with me, but Escambia Bay, East Bay, 2 large bays that connect and go in and out of the Pensacola Pass, fed by 3 very large rivers, actually 4. Excuse me, the Escambia River, which feeds Escambia Bay, Blackwater River, very small, starts in Alabama, really close to the border, and then the Yellow Shoal, big system. Well, we're in the estuary program meetings, and FDACS, Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Sciences, they're responsible for farming. So agriculture, peanuts, cotton, corn, soybeans, right? They're also in charge of oyster farming. And they're like, we're going to close a bigger part of the bay. So we're in a meeting. We're all hearing this kind of at first. You know, there's a bunch of scientists and then there's a bunch of elected officials who, if they had to pass an 8th grade science test today, hands down, could not pass it. I promise. I promise. I dare somebody to give all elected officials from the city, county on up an 8th grade biology quiz that they could know. Anyway, fast forward. That's the snarky in me. Sorry, can't tone that down. What did I hear from Bob Cole's mouth? This is where I just went south with him. What do you mean you're going to close down this to oystering? Not that we had any oysters left. What do you mean? How long are we on the list? It was like a little kid saying, how long am I going to be on Santa Claus's bad list, right? And the FDACS comes back and says, well, 7 to 9 years. How do we get off of that? And it's like, clean up your water quality, asshole, right? No. Far more important to get off the list than doing the work that it might take to clean up the water. I have seen it all. It pisses me off. I have no more patience. And you know, all the groups that are trying to do good, there's only a handful. I mean, Jackie is a great example of, you know, the work that she's doing and her newsletters that come out. Surely you've done your homework on those. Yeah. You know, once upon a time, the people who seem to care the most are the nurturers. And they're the ones that care for the family. They're the ones that care for the elders. They're the ones that care for the children. And we have done such a bad job taking care of our natural resources. And yet we're so lucky that we still have so many intact. But South Florida, oh my God, Tampa, Orlando, South, my God, what a mess. You know, and like our estuary program is like, oh, Tampa Bay did it, da da da. Tampa Bay is podunk as far as watersheds go. They're all in Florida and they're all right there. This is a bigger system. And you know what? What would it take to do this right? What would it take to do 23 counties? I mean, what an experiment, right? To do 23 counties and have everybody on the same page protecting their waters. That would make a huge difference. But, you know, only if there's money attached to it will it get attention. And money, greed is just an ugly, ugly disease. It's cancer.
I have one more follow-up question to that.
Sure.
And this is Becca Burton, by the way. You know, you've been doing this a long time, and it's clear in your interview today that there's a lot of frustration. What keeps you going?
I don't know, you know, maybe the opportunity for a handful of people, like maybe yourselves. Like I'm planting seeds in each of you, and maybe one will germinate. Maybe you'll think back on this and say, you know what? She made a difference. I'm always amazed. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of students and elderly people in all walks of life. And I will help anybody that is interested in learning, but I will also not waste my time on people who want to be spoon fed and don't want to do their homework. And, you know, when I took over the BFA, we were, you know, it was a huge honor to have worked with these guys who worked so hard and never took a dime for the work that they did. And then when they got, you know, it was, I can tell you exactly, it was 2010. We're in this building and tables are pushed together, and there might have been 7 or 8 people. And the leader, Charles Lowry, who had been the president for 50 years, he says, well, unless there's somebody else at this table that wants to take over, we're going to disband in January. And I remember looking up and down the table going, oh my God, because everybody was like 70 or above, and I wasn't 50 yet. And it was like, well, shit, I guess I'm gonna. And for 2 years, and I'll tell you a little secret, for 2 years, I tried to cobble back together what they had done. And they had some pretty good record keeping, but then they had some other things that were terrible. For instance, they had a CPA. He was the son of one of the founders. He died of cancer. Every year, when it came time to update their 501c3, he did it on his computer. Well, these guys didn't know how to turn on a computer. So they had lost their 501c3. So what do I know about a 501c3? I'm a biologist, right? I rolled up my sleeves and I spent the next year piecing it all back together. So I reinstated them back to when and kept them going. Hosted meetings, tried to figure out where to find funding, thwarted everywhere. Okay. Wrote a grant, got a van. The van was intended to be a water quality lab to be able to go around so I wouldn't have to trash my own car, which, and so it's like it has paid off, but it's time for somebody else to take it forward because I'm just tired of the battle. And frankly, I've done my time. Yeah.
Is there anything that you feel is really important to share or that you were hoping to talk about that we haven't asked about?
I think that I think as you go forward in life, you guys have your lives ahead of you. I'm at the tail end of my career. That you need to think about what do you want the planet to look like 7 generations out. I remember when I moved to this area, I joined a couple of different groups, Native Plant Society, Audubon. I don't know my birds. I only know a couple of plants. But I've always learned that if you have good habitat, good water quality, good air quality, you'll be rewarded. So I live in a neighborhood. We have baby box turtles in our yard. We have all kinds of birds that visit our yard. I feel like I've made a difference. My secret goal is to be able to swim across Bayou Tahar with my dog and not get an earache. That's pretty selfish, but maybe not. Maybe if I did it, somebody else would do it too. So no, I'm grateful for your time today, and I'm glad that you guys reached out. One thing I will add to this, and I'll get you the recordings. The BFA, when StoryCorps came through here, Charles Lowry and J.D. Brown and Ernie Rivers were interviewed on a StoryCorps. Now, I've never heard it, so if you find it, please share it with me. Yeah, but they talked about the BFA as well. Yeah, so thank you for your time today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah,
All right, we're done.
yeah. Thank you.